Hello, storytellers. Mary Rose here, and I have a question for you. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? My writing is worth money. Woo-hoo! If anybody's having a little anxiety rush already, I apologize, but I want to let you know what we're going to talk about today. And if anybody says, well, that's an easy question to answer, of course my writing is worth money. Yes, I'm going to say. Okay, it's not that I don't believe you, but actions speak louder than words. And this might be one of those questions, is my writing worth money, that has an easy answer, but in real life, it might be hard to walk the talk. So I want you to be honest with me now. If someone came to you and said, I'd love to publish your work. I think it's incredible and you are a gifted writer and people should see this, but we can't afford to pay you. Are you in? How would you react? Would it be so easy to know what to say? If someone did offer you money to publish your work, would you be so excited that you signed on the dotted line? Or would you negotiate, ask for more, right? If someone offered you a chance to study writing and really improve, but you'd have to pay for it, would you automatically say no without even considering the opportunity? And if someone ever offered to buy your work outright so that you didn't have any rights to it anymore, is there a circumstance under which you would consider it? These are the questions that sort of come up in the real life of a writer. And how we value our work is going to determine how we approach those questions. It's not only going to affect how we approach these sort of businessy questions, but it's also going to affect how we approach the work itself. And so no matter where you are on your writing or publishing journey, this question I think is really worth exploring. It's our topic today, and I'm going to be pleased to discuss it with you. And I also am going to conclude today with a bit of a word of caution that applies to all writers. So I hope you'll stick around to the end and also offer your questions and comments as we go, because this is live. I am so pleased to be here live with you today. For anyone who's new to this live stream, new to this YouTube channel, let me introduce myself. I'm Mary Rose Wood. I am a writer by profession. I am best known for writing middle grade fiction, but I have written lots of things. I've written YA novels, I've written screenplays, I've written for the theater. And I am very pleased also to be a mentor to writers. And my platform is called Path of the Storyteller. And that's where I teach and mentor writers like some of the amazing folks who are gathering live here for this live stream. I'm so glad to see you here. Let me say a quick hello. Hillary, I am delighted to see you as always. Constanza is here. Hello, hello. Nancy is here. I am especially glad that Nancy is here today. And Cynthia is here. And the rest of you who haven't yet commented, I see you out there. It's nice to have you here live. Please share your thoughts as we go, because this question of what our writing is worth is a personal exploration that is well worth taking. Before we move into the content, I just also want to remind anyone who's here for the first time watching on YouTube, if you're not subscribed to this channel, this would be a great time to just hit the subscribe button. It's really helpful to me. Later on, you can decide whether you want to give it a thumbs up. If you like the content, I hope you will. And my appreciation for you is ongoing, and I have a free download at the Path of the Storyteller website that is a lot of fun, and I hope you'll get it. It is easy to find at www.pathofthestoryteller.com/challenge. It's a collection of writing prompts that are based on story structure, which is something that I talk about a lot on this channel. It's something I teach in a very in-depth way in the Path of the Storyteller program. And it's something I believe every writer needs to master in order to write effective stories. So go on and get those writing prompts. They will be fun to do, and they'll teach you something about story structure too. All right, let's dive in, everybody. I hope you're ready. I hope you're ready to grapple with this somewhat difficult question, complicated question, we'll call it. What is our writing worth? right? There's lots of ways to measure value. So money certainly is one, but we're going to look at the sort of broader question of what is our writing worth? Now, some writers, I know a lot of writers actually who would immediately come up with this answer. They would say, oh, well, yes, I mean, it would be nice to make money, but the truth is, I love to write. I would write whether anyone paid me or not. I actually don't really care if I make money for it. I do it for me. I love to do it. It feels good. I love good writing. It's personal self-expression, all of these sort of really like attractive sounding answers, right? There's nothing objectionable. We sort of like a person who talks that way, right? It feels so generous, so creative, so intrinsically motivated, right? But part of what they're saying is that I don't really need money to do it. I'm doing it for me. And some people might take this a little step further and they would say, well, all of that is so, but I really do want to get published. That's my goal, but I don't really care if I make money at it as long as I get published and it's out there and I can be proud of having a book published, whether it's published by somebody else or I independently published. That's what would satisfy me. So for some writers, it's the writing itself. They're fine. For some writers, it's the writing plus getting published. They're fine. They're really clear that they have this very modest, attitude toward the money part of it. And so if you like this answer, and I mean, there's really nothing to not like about it. If you like it because it's modest, it has a kind of humble quality, which is appealing, or you like it because it sounds like that's a writer who really is putting their art first above commercial concerns. That's kind of another way to interpret those sorts of statements. You might be, vibing with those writers. And I'm going to call them, for our purposes of introducing our talk today, Group A. Just Group A. It's just a good way to just divide two groups. So that's the Group A response. And if you're in the comments right now, I would love for you to say whether you think that you're Group A. But there is a Group B. And the Group B has a slightly different answer if you ask them, is your writing worth money? What's the relationship of writing and money? How do you value your writing? The Group B folks sometimes, breathe a heavy sigh and they say, well, this is the problem, isn't it? You can't really make money as a writer. And I would love to write. I would really love to write, but I know that I can never make a living at it. And so I just don't. It's just too frustrating. I can't really justify the time to do something that I know is never going to bear fruit. Now, this is also a pretty common answer. And I'm not going to say that these Group B people, we'll call them, and they are never in the Group A mood. I think there is some overlap. I think sometimes it depends on the day, right? But there are folks who kind of skew towards saying, it's sort of a waste of time. Yes. I've always wanted to write, but I can't really justify all the effort and expense. And I know that it would take, because it's never going to bear fruit. Now, these people, it sounds like they give up and forget about writing, but here's what I know, because I've been a mentor for so long. These people never actually extinguish that flame. They are always thinking about it. It's not on the front burner of how they spend their time. It might not be at the forefront of their mind 24/7, but scratch the surface of these people and they're like, well, yeah, I really always wanted to be a writer. And the minute something changes in their life, like if they, move from having a busy household full of children to having an empty nest, or if they move from having a busy life filled with work and career to retirement, one of the first things that pops out of the Jack in the Box is, maybe now is my time to write. And I've seen this happen so many times that I know that even that writer who's, protesting, oh, no, that's no good. I could never waste my time doing something that's never going to bear fruit. It's not the whole story. It's not the whole story. So we have our Group A people who are art for art's sake and self-expression and all of that. And we have our Group B people who are sort of talking a strong game about, my writing it's not, if it doesn't bear fruit in some material way, it's not really worth it. So am I going to come down and saying that one way of thinking is the right way and one way of thinking is the wrong way? I'm not. Even though they seem like opposites, it seems like one should be, right and one should be wrong. It's just one of those cases where writers are simply finding two different ways of expressing the same idea, which is that they just don't take their writing seriously. They haven't ascribed a value to it. The group A people have ascribed a kind of ephemeral value to it, kind of like, well, it makes me feel good while I'm doing it, but I I I don't think it's really worth anything. I would never demand payment for it. I would never, I would never insist on its value. I would never put a number to it or draw a firm line about what I think it's worth. And the group B people have just kind of surrendered in advance. They're like, well, I'm never going to get what I think it might be worth. So therefore, I'm not going to invest anything in it at all. So they're really just finding two different ways of using the idea of value to resist taking their work seriously. And so this is a form of resistance. Now, we talk about resistance a lot on this YouTube channel. We talk about it in the Path of the Storyteller program. Lots of people talk about the resistance creative people have to doing their creative work, and it gets expressed in a lot of ways. And so how this particular question of how we ascribe value to our work, it's not a bookkeeping question. It's not an accounting question. It's not even really fully a career question, although it will impact your career tremendously. It is really a question about the forms of resistance that we put in our own way and that we let trigger our choices about how we treat our work. Now, the thing about resistance that some of you might already know is that if we look at it and give it a name and bring it out of the shadows into the light, it ceases to have the same amount of power. It becomes less of an unconscious brake that we just keep pressing. Like we've got one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake, and we think we're pressing the gas, but we're really pressing the brake at the same time. And we're not aware of the brake. We just know that the gas pedal doesn't seem to be working as well as we wish it would. We're not making the progress we wish we were. And so that to me is like a little image of how resistance works. We're aware of our effort. We're not consciously aware of our resistance, but our lack of progress is palpable and frustrating. So that's part of what I want to get to today. This question of what your writing is worth is just one of those forms of resistance that I hope to dismantle by bringing it out into the sunshine. All right, so let's talk about this idea of value and worth. This is a very practical way of looking at it. And in life outside of our writing practices, we use the idea of value to make choices about investment and return. And this is like the rational part of us when we're not sitting as writers, when we're just maybe, just looking at our life in general and maybe maybe literally our financial picture. Investment and return. How we ascribe value to our writing is going to control or strongly influence how we decide to invest in it. And there's a lot of ways to invest in something other than just cash, right? And it's also going to influence what return we allow ourselves to expect or that we insist upon, that we draw a boundary about. Okay. And so this is just a truth of investing. If you don't invest anything, you are not going to get very much return. But if you invest wisely in the right things in the right way, then you get a return. So assuming that we want to get a good return on our investment in our writing, then we have to look at this question. So what I want to do now is I want to look at a few different ways that we might have the option to invest in our work, and a few different ways that we might be able to expect a specific type of return on our work, depending on how we allow ourselves to define the value of our work. So this is really, what am I willing to invest and what am I entitled to expect in return? We're going to do investments first. Now, the number one thing, as I'm sure you all know, that we invest when we decide to write is time. It takes time to write. Most of my students are working on novels, and it takes time to write a novel. I mean, it takes time to write even a sloppy, careless draft of a novel. And it takes a lot of time to bring a novel from blank page to completion. It might take a year, it might take 2 years, it might take 3 years, like depending on the book and how your writing process is going, how much space in your life there is. So that's a huge investment. I think the older we get, the more we realize that, sort of time is the main investment that we have. It's precious, right? So we have to look at time first. How we value our work is going to determine how much time we're willing to invest in it. Now, I want to give you a perspective on time. I want you to think about the books that are on your bookshelf as I think about the books that are on my bookshelf. They're such good friends. And I want you to think about how many books on your bookshelf were published within the past year or two. Maybe quite a lot, depending on what your reading taste is, right? Now, when you think about that, how many books on your bookshelf were published more than 10 years ago? Now, is the first number bigger or smaller than the second number? Interesting, right? If you're like me, probably I've got a lot more books on my bookshelf that were published more than 10 years ago than were published in the last year or two. So now let's keep playing with these numbers. How many books on your bookshelf were written more than 50 years ago? Are some of those your favorites? If it were me, some of them would be. How many books on your bookshelf were written 100 years ago or more? How many books on your bookshelf were written more than, I don't know, 400 years ago? 1,000 years ago? What is the oldest story sitting on your bookshelf? I really want you to think about this. For me, I'm thinking it's about 4,000 years old. I think there's an edition of Gilgamesh on my bookshelf someplace. We're going, it's a story that's about 4,000 years old. It's older than Homer. It's older than the Iliad and the Odyssey. We don't have exact dates, right? We don't have publication dates for these stories. I really just want you to think about the longevity of a well-told story, of an important work of storytelling. They can last a really long time. So when we start to think about how much time we're willing to invest in our writing, we have to put it in perspective of how long our writing has the potential to last. Now, this starts to feel grandiose, right? Are you trying to write something that's going to last a few hundred years? I don't know. Do you think that the writers who sat down to write the stories that are on your shelves that were written hundreds of years ago, do you think they really sat around thinking about it? Or were they just like Shakespeare trying to get the script ready in time for opening night? I mean, it's possible that he was just in the day-to-day. He was extremely busy, He was a very busy writer. He was producing his own work. He was casting. He was acting in some of his own plays, right? He was really busy. So I don't know that writers thinking about their work lasting a long time as they're writing is what makes the work last a long time. I think that is just a thing that happens as a result of doing a really good job as a storyteller and maybe some other forces, maybe there's some luck involved. But if you're building something that's going to last, I don't know, 1,000 years, it's going to take a while. There is a saying that means exactly this. Rome was not built in a day, and yet there it still is, the eternal city. So I want you to consider the amount of time that it takes to write a novel in the perspective not only of, oh, but I'm so busy and I only have half an hour a day, and I've got people to drop off at school, and I've got stuff to do, and there's grocery shopping, the car needs to go in for a wash. It's very easy to rattle off all the demands on your time. But, take a breath, I say. Rome wasn't built in a day. And there is a chance that you're building Rome. I mean, there's a chance that what you're working on is going to last a really long time. So how long do you think it ought to take? So maybe the value of what you're doing just increased a little bit. And now you can say, oh, okay, well, if that's the case, then maybe it's okay to invest this much time. So that's the investment of time. Is it worth the investment of time? Now, here's another thing we have to invest in our work. We have to ask ourselves, is this work worth the emotional discomfort of what is often an uncertain process of creation? Now, emotional discomfort, it sounds so sterile in a way, because writers love to talk about how arduous writing is. There's that famous quote that writing is easy. You just stare at a blank sheet of paper until the drops of blood form on your forehead. I keep forgetting who said that, but it's a familiar quote. It's very melodramatic. Writers are always complaining about how much suffering there is involved in writing. Is it true or is it not true that writing can really stir up discomfort and feelings? All right. Hillary's on YouTube and she's saying that I'm back. All right. So if anybody's on Facebook, and it's not working on Facebook, I can't actually tell. And I have gotten an error message that this was a streaming glitch that might have been at Facebook's end. So if you're on Facebook and you want to continue with the live stream today, head on over to my YouTube channel and we're going to continue. And if you're on Facebook and it doesn't work for you, then you're going to have to come on over to YouTube and watch the replay. All right. I'm going to just leave a little comment for the Facebook people to join us on YouTube if you're still having trouble. Isn't technology fantastic? The things that we do. All right, gang. I'm just going to quickly resume and pick up where we left off and try to be quick so that we don't go to overtime. All right. So our topic today has to do with how we ascribe value to our work. And I just talked about the issue of time, and that when we ascribe a value to our work, it sort of guides us in knowing how much to invest in our work as writers, and also what kind of returns we might expect as a reward for our investment. And the one that we already spoke about is time. So I hope most of that got recorded. If not, I can always pop in and add some clarifying comments to the video replay. But the second thing that we can invest or sort of ask ourselves, I should say, about how we value our work is our work worth investing the emotional discomfort of the creative process, which can be very uncertain. And anytime we human beings have to cope with uncertainty, we're uncomfortable. And that's just true for all of us. Most of us really, really will gravitate towards certainty. And when we have no certainty, it's a state of free fall. It raises anxiety. Now, there might be some thrill seekers out there who say, no, I love uncertainty. I like nothing better than the blank page and not knowing what's going to happen next. And if that's you, that's fine. I myself had some training and spent a few years of my creative development doing improv. And I've talked about it before on these live streams. And I just want to reiterate that this was hugely beneficial for me, not only in a technical way. It taught me fun skills, and I had a great time. There's nothing quite like doing comedy in a comedy club. It was really a riot. But it also taught me to be comfortable with uncertainty, literally not knowing what's going to come out of your own mouth next, right? Never mind your scene partners, not knowing how the audience is going to respond. And I started to understand the centrality of being uncomfortable with uncertainty to the creative process. When you're a reader, somebody else slogged through the uncertainty of not knowing what was going to happen next. The writer did all of that struggle. They did all that suffering and messing around with not knowing is what's going to happen next. I'm not sure what the ending should be. Right, all of the uncertainty about it. When am I going to finish this book? They've done that. So reading is very comfortable. All the uncertainty has been taken away. So the necessity of being comfortable with uncertainty is part of the creative process, but it's going to take a lot of work. And so what we need to think about is, do we value our work enough, highly enough, to recognize that that kind of struggle and discomfort is worth it? And we all know that sometimes we struggle and have to go through discomfort to achieve our goals. So if the goal is worth it, then we'll do it. But if we don't value our work highly enough, the minute we become uncomfortable, we're going to bail out. So investing in that area is also essential to actually getting to the end of something. Here's another thing we have to think about that's directly related to how we value our work. Is our work worth the discomfort of telling the truth? I'm really talking about vulnerability here. I'm talking about emotional exposure. To write well means that we have to tell the truth about what life is like. We have to tell the truth about emotional experiences. We have to go to our tender places, right? We have to relive the moments of our lives that maybe were really, full of grief, full of fear, full of despair. If we're going to write these emotions truthfully, we have to allow ourselves to feel them. We're human beings, so we have a pretty rich emotional palette. But I know how hard it can be to just tear the scab off of all that stuff in order to be able to write well. So that is one of the things that we have to be comfortable with. Is it worth the discomfort of telling the truth? Here's another thing that we have to really check in with about how we value our work. Is the work worth the investment that it takes to gain mastery? Now, this is a different kind of investment because yes, it's time. Yes, it's effort. There may be some money involved, right? And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And also discomfort, because we have to go through the discomfort of recognizing where we actually are on the journey. We're not yet at a place of mastery. So that can be very disheartening to some people when they realize that, oh, the stuff that I've been writing is not really ready for prime time yet. And I actually have a ways to go before I'm ready to play in the big leagues. So that's all investment, right? You've got to take the time to learn how to be a professional level writer. You've got to put in the work. You are likely to have to invest a little bit of money in books or courses, training. Maybe you're going to take workshops. There's stuff to learn. There's stuff to learn. And this is true of any profession. There is a cost to entry. You have to get training. You have to find a way to be an apprentice, formally or informally. You've got to get yourself in the orbit of mentors, people who have more experience. And that's really what I mean by apprenticeship. Maybe there's a certification or a degree for some professions. Writing, fortunately, doesn't have those as a necessity, although some people do get MFAs and other degrees in writing. But whatever endeavor you want to become a master at, you start at the bottom and you work your way up through the ranks. And it takes time, it takes effort, it takes money, and it takes, slogging through the discomfort of the learning process. So a writer who values their work highly is willing to invest in the actual mastery of the writing, and if you don't value your work to some extent, you're not going to be willing to make that investment. And guess what kind of return you're going to get? You're not going to get the return that you hope for. So let's talk about returns quickly. When we have done our job, when we have invested appropriately, when we valued our work appropriately, we've invested the time, we've invested the effort, we've slogged through the emotional discomfort of uncertainty, we've slogged through the emotional discomfort of gaining mastery, we've done all that stuff. So now we can expect some returns, right? And the first return that we need to expect is what we've written worth reading? We should expect that what we have is worth reading, that's part of its value. It's worth the reader's time. And the reader, that's a big ask. The reader's going to invest time and, their emotions and stuff in getting our, in interacting with our work, our finished work. And so we have to ask ourselves, do I value my work highly enough to think that it's worth the reader's time? So that's another way to value our work. And this is hopefully one of the returns on our investment. In order to work professionally as a novelist, we are almost certainly going to be seeking representation. We're going to want to have an agent to help manage our careers and help our books get published. And so we have to ask, in terms of the returns that we can expect on our investment, is what I have here worth representing? This is another way that we can ascribe value to the work. Now, if we feel that we've invested appropriately and we value our work appropriately and it is worth representing, that is going to approach how we seek representation. We might be very choosy about who we submit to. We might take the time to make sure we're submitting to people that we would want to work with. Now, that sounds self-evident, but a lot of writers who don't really, they haven't valued their work enough to make the appropriate investment up front. And so when it comes to it's time to think, well, is it worth someone representing as an agent? They can't really ascribe enough value to it. And so they might go after agents that have no reputation or people that they see on the internet who are looking for writers without really doing any due diligence, without finding out if these people are legitimate, without seeing what their track record of success is, without asking all the questions, right? They might not approach the search for an agent from a position of valuing their own work. And so this is how it might impact that. Similarly, the value you ascribe to your own work is going to impact how you approach the publishing journey. Let's say you get that agent and you start to get offers to be published, or maybe an offer to be published comes your way before you get an agent. You have to look at the value of your work and say, is this opportunity to get published commensurate with the value of my work? If you value your work highly, how might you treat that opportunity? Might you investigate, do your due diligence, review the contract, negotiate the deal points, make sure that everything is just the way you want it. Take your time. Maybe there are multiple offers coming your way, not just take the first one that comes your way. It's just a different way of valuing your work is going to affect how much of a return on that investment you expect and perhaps insist upon when it comes to the opportunities to publish. Here's the last thing about the returns on your investment that I want to talk about, because we've sort of taken you on this imaginary journey about the book is now worth reading, it's worth being represented, it's worth publishing. Once it's published, is your job over defending the value of your work? No, it's not. Because you may find yourself in a position to have to set boundaries and perhaps even actively defend things like creative control over adaptations, what changes you allow to be made to your work, whether you're going to give permission to somebody to turn it into a television series or a movie or a graphic novel. Now, these are happy problems to have, right? I mean, a lot of us think, oh, that would be great if somebody wanted to make my book into a movie. But if you don't value your work appropriately, you might be so excited to say, well, somebody want to make my book into a movie and sign on the dotted line without realizing what exactly it is that you've signed over. There is a sort of a famous example regarding the obviously very successful Harry Potter books, and which have been turned into the very successful Harry Potter movies and all of the merchandise and the theme parks and all the rest. The first movie offers, according to what I've read, that were presented to J.K. Rowling were like, we love the books, we'd like to make them into movies. One small thing, we're going to set them in the United States. We think they'll do better if we do them in the States. We're going to cast them with Americans. And J.K. Rowling, who, to be fair, at this point probably, could easily afford to say yes or no to what came her way, said no, I'm not going to let you set these in the United States. They're English stories. They're set in England, and that's the way they're going to be. So, that's an example of the kind of thing that might come your way, even after your book has gone through the whole publishing journey. You might be asked, for all kinds of uses. You might be asked if a revised version of your book could be created for certain markets. Now, listen, if you're alive, it's up to you. If you're no longer alive, it's up to your estate to make these decisions. And so you might also consider how you treat the legacy of your work, because if in fact we're going to take seriously that work might last a long time, would it trouble you to think that years after you're dead, somebody's going to take your work and rewrite it and republish it with your name still on the cover, but in a version that you would not like? That's something to consider. You might want to look at your paperwork and how your estate gives permission or holds permission for creative control. So you can see that we can go from, the bottom rung of the ladder to a very elevated rung of the ladder in terms of how we value our work. And it affects how we treat our work. It affects how we approach the process and how we take care of the work that we create. Now, I want to quickly conclude, since we had an interruption, and I know that there's some comments coming in about this and some questions. And so we'll stay and make sure that we get all the comments and questions answered before we wrap up today. But I do want to conclude with something important, that there is a saying among working writers, and that saying is this: money flows toward the writer, never away. Now, what does that mean? There are many, many, many folks out there who maybe predatory is a strong word, but I'll use it because I'm not afraid of strong words, who are predatory when it comes to writers. And do you know why they're predatory? Because there are so many writers out there in that group A that we talked about at the beginning of this talk, who are so attached to this idea that, oh, I just write for myself. It gives me joy. I'm a creative person. It's self-expression. It's enough for me to think that people might enjoy my work. I don't do it for the money, right? There's enough writers out there who will say that people will come and say, oh, great. Well, so if you won't do it for the money, that's fine. We won't pay you, but we would really like to publish your work. And they will promise certain things that sound really appealing. We used to call these folks vanity presses, vanity publishers. With the rise of independent publishing, the amount of companies out there that are happy to take your money to do very little, and usually nothing that you couldn't do better and more cheaply yourself, has really skyrocketed. And it breaks my heart how often I see a kind of a newbie writer who maybe has worked on something really hard, it means a lot to them, asking for advice, on the internet, maybe in a Facebook group or something, saying, oh, some folks came to me and they want to publish my book and they want to charge me $5,000. Is that the going rate? And it's like, there is no going rate. You're the writer. The money comes to you. The money flows to you, not away from you. There are ways that you can use money to invest in your work. And here's what they are. The appropriate ways to use money to invest in your work is invest in yourself, improve your skills, educate yourself, go to, networking events where you can connect with agents, perhaps take a course, join a program, do your due diligence about that too. Make sure that the person who's taking your money and promising to make you a better writer, is a pretty good writer, because there's a lot of folks out there who teach writing, and you look at what they've published and it's like an indie published novel on Amazon. It's like, well, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but if that's the extent of their creative output, they may not have the wisdom to really lead you to where you want to be. So, be discerning in your mentors. Don't be afraid to invest in training. That's an investment in you. That's something you carry with you, just like any education. I will always be a fan of investing in education, but you don't have to invest in an MFA that's going to put you in debt for 10 years. That's not necessary. You can find lots of really good training. Obviously, I would love if you all came and studied with me A Path of the Storyteller, but there's lots of ways to get good training, okay? And that's an appropriate investment, that kind of thing. But don't pay to have somebody that you've never heard of publish your book just because they approach you, right? Don't go into business with the vanity press. The things that you can invest in your writing are your time, your effort, appropriate funds, right? But it all has to do with how you personally value your writing. And if you are valuing your writing in such a way that the money starts to flow away from you, or that you start to, let other people have control of it without really addressing this question, that's where I really want you to think twice. Think twice. If you have questions about this, you leave a comment below this video, because I'm going to get that comment and I'm going to swoop in like a mama bear and say, nope, don't do that. Or maybe, okay. Another way that you might feel like a financial investment in your writing is merited is maybe having a good lawyer, right? If you're actually signing a contract, you might want to have a lawyer look it over. That's a really good idea. If you have an excellent agent who really guides your career in a way, they're going to take a piece of your earnings. That is money well spent. All right. So there are ways that money sort of flows away, but it's an investment that gets you powerful returns. So that is my conclusion today, guys. I do apologize for the technical trouble. The issue is almost always Facebook related here, and I'm going to seriously consider just starting to do this on YouTube. I think it's going to be a much more stable experience. So those of you who are accustomed to watching on Facebook, if you're not used to watching videos on YouTube, this might be a good opportunity to add to your toolkit of how to get information. I'm going to cast my eyes over to the comments and questions now. So anybody who'd like to add a comment or ask a question, this is a perfect time to do it. Now, let's see if we've got some comments. And I just want to say, I really have to laugh at Nancy's comment when the live stream crashed. She said very wisely, Nancy, resistance, this must be super important. I think it is. I think how we value our creative work is super important. It really is. It's something that we will always, always be thinking about at every stage of our careers. And for those of you who are not yet published, it can be tricky to really own that your work has value, right? Because you don't have that outside validation that you think is going to make a difference. I just want to tell you, the sense of value in your work comes from inside you. It really will never come from external markers. So get in the habit now of generating it internally. Okay, let's see. Who else? I'm going to share. Oh, let's see. A comment from Anne. Now, Anne, yes, the universe is speaking. Lots of belief in fate here. This is what storytellers must believe in, right? Since we create stories that have a beginning, middle, and end, we like to think that this principle of causality and story structure rules our daily activities, and how often it does seem to. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. So Anne shares, the universe is speaking, and then adds, currently texting my son who's discovered he'll not pass a class. And he was supposed to pass, and he was supposed to graduate. Learning can be daunting. So Anne, thanks for sharing that. So Anne is really kind of signing off on the fact that learning itself is a journey through discomfort and obstacles. And so, it's fun. I love to learn. I'm sure most of you do too. I think being a lifelong learner is part of having a really fulfilling life. But it's not easy, because you start from a place of I want to use the word inadequacy, but not in a judgmental way. You start needing to learn. You're in a place that you don't know the things you need to know. And so every step along the way, you're kind of grappling with the fact that you're running after the bus all the time. There's always more to learn. Now, if you can really cultivate a good attitude about learning, right? A growth mindset, as they say. This is a tremendous asset, because it will not eliminate, but it will take some of the heat off the necessary discomfort, the ups and downs, and the frustrations of going through a learning process. And if we can do that, then investing the time and effort and perhaps some money in pursuing and attaining mastery in our creative work will not be quite as daunting as it might otherwise be. Anne finishes her tale with a beautiful concluding shape of story structure, saying, "We have to hang in there indeed." As a good storyteller, Anne, you know that obstacles in the second act are not a sign to quit. They're a sign to level up. Mentors cheering from the sidelines are a welcome nudge. They certainly are. For writers, for our children, the mentor energy is a powerful part of storytelling. And one more really nice comment from Anne. I'm so glad that you said this. Addressing the point of writers writing for joy and self-fulfillment and saying the not for money, she adds, we could be unwittingly hurting other writers too, because it deflates the value of a product that a publisher definitely intends to make money on. Excellent, excellent point, Anne. Just know, of course, that there are guilds and unions and organizations that advocate for writers in various ways, depending on what kind of writer you are and what kind of advocacy we're talking about. Writers who work professionally as screenwriters and television writers belong to the Writers Guild. They might belong to Writers Guild West or East, depending on whether they're based on the West Coast or the East Coast. But this is a union. And this is a union that advocates for fair pay practices, for equity in the workplace, for health benefits, for pensions. Like it's a serious business. It's a very, very profitable. Storytelling is an incredibly profitable business. And publishing companies that publish books and film studios that make movies and, TV production companies that make television shows, they do it because they make a lot of money doing it. And they can't do anything without the writer. My students know that I often say that the writer is the goose that lays the golden egg, and we have to treat ourselves accordingly. We're not, we're not useless. We are where the project begins. It begins with a good script. And so, even as I record this today, the Writers Guild is, approaching a contract deadline. And so, like any other labor union, there's talk of what they want and whether they would go on strike to get it and all that kind of stuff. And even as I record this, we have issues in the U.S. where I am about books being removed from schools because of content, and about other books being republished in altered forms. There's quite a lot written right now about something that's going on with Roald Dahl's books, whose publisher wanted to reissue them with alterations. And there are groups like PEN, which advocates for the rights of authors to have creative control for free speech, right? And things like this. There's just a lot to defend when you are in the business of telling stories. There's a lot of issues having to do with the value of your work that are not just financial. There are a lot of financial issues, but there are these other issues as well about your creative rights and all of the rest of it. So start to think about that. Just put it on the list of things that you're aware of. You are a storyteller too. No matter where you are in your path today, this is the journey that you're on. And, learn to talk the talk. Pay attention to what's going on with the writers who are out there already in the marketplace, because the decisions that get made about how they are compensated, how their creative work is protected, those are going to be the rules that you're going to end up playing by when it's your turn, right, to be at that place in your career. So there's really a lot to consider. I want to thank everybody. Let's wrap up today because we're running a little late because of our tech problem. I want to thank everybody for hanging in there if you were able to. And if you weren't able to, hopefully we'll get a replay that makes sense. If necessary, I'll go back in and edit it and stitch it together and re-upload it so it's not filled with gaps and repetitions. I don't know exactly how that's all going to play out in the finished version. I'm afraid to look, but I will look after it's ready for me to look at it. I want to thank you all for coming live. I hope this topic is of interest to all of you and gives you at least something to think about. But most of all, I hope that you will find the way that feels good to value your work, to think of it as something really, really precious, to invest in it wisely, and to fully expect the appropriate return on that investment. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful week till the next time I see you. I think the clocks are going to be changed by the next time I see you, but it'll still be 1 p.m. Pacific time. Wherever we are in the world, it'll be 1 p.m. Pacific time. And I look forward to seeing you then. And until then, happy writing.